We'll give starting on time a shot. Not something that typically happens at a conference, but we'll be a little bit innovative with this. My name is Will Morgan. I am the chair for this panel, which means I have the great pleasure of introducing people and not really having to say much. And this session is focused on helping journal editors establish data access and research transparency practices. And to give you a little bit of a background on this, this started like a lot of the projects in the social sciences that are tied to this several years ago. And it was with a working group that was focused on trying to come up with some standards and norms for data access, which means making sure that the data in a study that's published is available somewhere and actually is available, and that the research process is clear to people. So how was the sample selected? How was the coding done? If certain cases were excluded, how did that happen? But to come up with this in a manner that's generalizable and not just focusing on one type of research, so say quantitative survey research, but could also be used for qualitative work, could be used for experimental work. I think we've all had the experience of contacting an author who's published a study and asking them if you can get a copy of their data. And I did this actually with the journal that SSP publishes, and the author said, that came out 4 years ago. I have no idea where that is. And I actually just wanted the questions, the exact question wording, because I wanted to use some of those questions. But they were gone in sands of time. There was actually a study that I looked at that examined data that was supposed to be available, and it was only based on what was said in the journal standards, and only about 27% of the cases did that actually happen. So it's out there, maybe. So the idea was to try to have a method to ensure that this would take place in published research, and to come up with some standards to help journal editors and societies accomplish that. Because we all want it, and there are many journals that have that as a quote-unquote requirement, but they don't verify that it happens, and that's the issue. So how do you tie that into the process? And we'll hear from various experts today about how they've done that. So I'm curious, how many of you are journal editors? So if you're interested in doing it, these folks know how to do it, and one at least is doing it right now as an editor. He can share his challenges and successes with everybody. One thing that, just a curious issue that happened, I don't know if you've heard about a paper written by Green and Lepore that was retracted from Science last week. The paper had about 12,000 observations, a survey that was done at one point in time. Then they had people canvass the people who were surveyed and give them an argument about why gay marriage should be allowed. And then they were surveyed at time 2, and they changed their opinion. And it got coverage in NPR, it was published. In fact, that paper was presented at a conference for the association that I run, and it was given an award as best paper for the 2014 conference last month. Well, then the data wasn't available. Some authors wanted to replicate it because the findings were so dramatic. And as the tale played out, the second author, Don Green, reached the conclusion that the data was fabricated and retracted the paper. And it's either a good sign that the system worked, people asking for access, and people trying to replicate the study, that worked, or it's a challenge with the current system where the data does not have to be available, it's just they're asked to make it available. We actually surveyed our members about their opinions, whether they'd be more likely or less likely to submit an article to a journal that had practices like we're going to discuss, where you're required to archive the data that you use in your study. And it actually made them more likely to want to submit an article to a journal. So you'd think it would be the opposite, because it's extra work. But in reality, about 30% said it would make them more likely to want to submit to that journal. For, in essence, both issues about archiving the data and then providing information about how they did the coding and analysis. They were a little bit less supportive when it came to replication. And we by virtue of when we were surveying members, a portion were surveyed before this paper was retracted, and a portion was surveyed after. And after the paper was retracted, it bounced up about 8%. They went from being neutral to saying, gosh, I want to publish in a journal that's going to require that the data is archived. Because it should imply that the data is real, the paper is held to higher standards. So with that as a bit of an introduction, I think I'm going to stay up here and just introduce you and maybe hide in the background. We'll start with Mercedes Crosas, who's at Harvard University, the Institute for Quantitative Social Sciences.